The wind screams across the frozen steppe, carrying with it a cold so profound it seems to reach into the bones of the earth itself. The temperature has plunged far below what any modern human would consider survivable without elaborate preparation. Ice crystals form in the air, suspended like frozen dust, catching the pale light of a sun that barely rises above the horizon. Somewhere beneath this merciless sky, a small band of humans huddles together in a shallow depression carved into a hillside, their bodies pressed close, their breath forming clouds that freeze almost instantly. They have no fire tonight, they cannot risk one, and yet, somehow, they will survive until morning. This is the reality that our ancestors faced for tens of thousands of years during the depths of the last glacial period. We often imagine early humans gathered around comforting flames, protected from the darkness and cold by the dancing light of fire. It is a romantic image, deeply embedded in our cultural understanding of prehistoric life. But this image is incomplete. Fire, that transformative technology that helped define our species, was not always the reliable savior we imagine it to be. In the Ice Age world, fire could be as dangerous as the cold it was meant to combat. Understanding why reveals something profound about the ingenuity of our ancestors and forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about survival in the deep past. The glacial landscapes of Europe and northern Asia presented challenges almost beyond modern comprehension. Winter temperatures regularly dropped to 40 or 50 degrees below zero. Blizzards could last for days, blotting out the sun entirely and burying entire valleys under meters of snow. The growing season was brutally short, limiting the available plant fuels for burning. Forests retreated southward, leaving vast expanses of treeless tundra and steppe where wood was precious and scarce. In these environments, maintaining a fire was not simply a matter of gathering fuel and striking a spark. It required careful calculation, constant vigilance, and an awareness that the flames meant to save you might instead become your death. Consider the challenge of smoke. In an open landscape, smoke disperses harmlessly into the atmosphere, but early humans often sought shelter in caves, rock overhangs, and semi-enclosed structures, precisely because these spaces offered protection from wind and retained body heat. Lighting a fire in such an environment created an immediate problem. Smoke accumulated rapidly in enclosed spaces, filling the air with toxic gases. Carbon monoxide, invisible and odorless, could render an entire group unconscious before anyone recognized the danger. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age cave sites reveals that many were only seasonally occupied, and some show patterns of use that suggest inhabitants carefully limited fire use based on ventilation conditions. The blackened ceilings of certain caves tell stories not just of warmth and cooking, but of dangerous miscalculations that filled living spaces with choking fumes. The oxygen problem compounded these risks. Fire consumes oxygen voraciously, and in a sealed or poorly ventilated shelter, a large fire could deplete breathable air within hours. Early humans learned through hard experience to balance the need for warmth against the need for air. Small, carefully managed fires became the norm in enclosed spaces, but even these carried risks. A sudden change in wind direction could push smoke back into a shelter. A partially blocked entrance could transform a cozy refuge into an asphyxiation chamber. The archaeological record hints at these dangers through the positioning of hearths near entrances and ventilation gaps. Evidence of sophisticated understanding of airflow dynamics developed through generations of trial and fatal error. Fuel scarcity presented another critical limitation. The vast mammoth steppes that stretched across Ice Age Eurasia supported enormous herds of herbivores, but grew few trees. Humans in these regions relied heavily on bone and animal dung for fuel, materials that burned differently than wood and produced their own hazards. Bone fires smoldered at lower temperatures and generated acrid, choking smoke. Dung fires required enormous quantities of dried material to maintain useful heat. Gathering sufficient fuel in a frozen landscape demanded tremendous energy expenditure, calories that might not be replaced if hunting failed. In the deepest winter months, when snow buried everything and temperatures made extended outdoor activity dangerous, fire became an increasingly costly proposition. Sometimes, the energy required to maintain flames exceeded the thermal benefit they provided. Perhaps most terrifying was the way fire announced human presence to every predator within miles. The flickering light visible for vast distances across the open steppe, the smell of smoke carrying on the wind, the scent of cooking meat drawing hungry carnivores from their dens. Ice Age humans shared their world with cave lions, giant hyenas, wolves, and the massive cave bear. These predators had learned, over countless generations, to associate human camps with potential food. A fire might deter some animals at close range, but it also served as a beacon, advertising the location of vulnerable prey. Archaeological sites reveal evidence of predator attacks on human encampments. Bones scarred by carnivore teeth, mixed with the remains of human meals. In certain circumstances, remaining cold and hidden offered better protection than warmth and visibility. Wind posed its own dangers. The Ice Age landscape was dominated by relentless winds that swept across the open steppes and funneled through mountain valleys. Maintaining a fire in such conditions required constant attention and substantial wind breaks. Even then, gusts could send sparks flying into bedding materials, igniting the very shelters people had laboriously constructed. Worse, strong winds could fan small flames into uncontrollable conflagrations, consuming precious fuel supplies and destroying essential equipment. In the most exposed locations, fire was simply not practical. The wind would extinguish flames faster than they could be fed, or scatter burning materials across the landscape, creating chaos and danger. Given these limitations, early humans developed sophisticated alternatives to fire-based warmth. These strategies demonstrate remarkable engineering intelligence and reveal our ancestors as adaptive problem solvers rather than primitive beings stumbling through a hostile world. The solutions they devised were elegant, effective, and in many ways more sustainable than constant fire maintenance. Insulation technology reached remarkable sophistication during the Ice Age. Archaeological evidence reveals that humans constructed elaborate bedding systems using multiple layers of animal hides, dried grasses, and other plant materials. These bedding platforms were often built above the cold ground on frameworks of bone or stone, creating dead air spaces that dramatically reduced heat loss to the frozen earth. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that such bedding systems, combined with properly designed hide coverings, could maintain survivable sleeping temperatures even without fire, provided the occupants remained still and conserved body heat. The construction of these insulated sleeping platforms required substantial knowledge of materials and careful planning, skills transmitted across generations through teaching and imitation. Clothing systems became extraordinarily sophisticated. Analysis of bone needles and hide working tools from Ice Age sites reveals that humans created tailored, fitted garments rather than simple wrapped skins. These garments featured multiple layers designed to trap air, the key to insulation. Inner layers of soft fur worn against the skin wicked moisture away from the body. Middle layers provided bulk insulation, outer layers of tightly processed hide blocked wind penetration. The construction of such clothing required extensive knowledge of different hide types, sophisticated processing techniques to maintain flexibility in extreme cold, and needlework skills that took years to master. A complete cold weather clothing system might incorporate hides from several different animals, each selected for specific properties of warmth, durability, and water resistance. Body heat management strategies extended beyond individual clothing to group behavior. Humans are social animals, and Ice Age bands leveraged this social nature for thermal survival. Sleeping in groups, bodies pressed together under shared coverings, dramatically reduced individual heat loss. The arrangement of sleepers was not random. Children and vulnerable individuals were placed in protected central positions, surrounded by the body heat of adults. Archaeological evidence of sleeping arrangements can sometimes be inferred from wear patterns on cave floors and the distribution of personal objects, suggesting highly organized spatial use within shelters. Underground architecture offered another solution to the limitations of fire. In the wind-swept loess landscapes of Central Europe and the plains of Ukraine and Russia, Ice Age humans constructed remarkable semi-subterranean dwellings. These structures, built partially below ground level and covered with thick layers of earth and hides stretched over mammoth bone frameworks, provided natural insulation against temperature extremes. The thermal mass of the surrounding Earth moderated internal temperatures, keeping interiors cooler in summer and warmer in winter. Such dwellings required less heating than surface structures and could be warmed effectively with small, carefully managed fires or even body heat alone during the coldest periods when fire risks were highest. Windbreaks and thermal engineering extended beyond dwelling construction. Humans learned to select campsites based on natural wind protection, using terrain features to shield living areas from the worst of the gales. They constructed additional barriers from stacked bones, stones, and compressed snow, creating microclimates within the larger hostile environment. These engineered spaces could be many degrees warmer than the surrounding landscape, making the difference between survivable, cold, and lethal exposure. The knowledge of where to camp, how to orient shelters, and what materials to use for wind barriers represented crucial survival information passed down through oral tradition and practical demonstration. The accumulation of all these strategies points to something profound about Ice Age humanity. These were not simple creatures reacting instinctively to their environment. They were sophisticated engineers who understood thermodynamics intuitively, who could evaluate multiple solutions to complex problems, and who could transmit hard-won knowledge across generations. The survival of human populations through the coldest periods of the Ice Age required not just physical adaptation, but cultural adaptation. The accumulation of techniques, knowledge, and wisdom that transcended individual experience. When we stand today in a heated room, protected from winter by technologies our ancestors could never have imagined, we might pause to consider what we have lost as much as what we have gained. Those Ice Age survivors carried in their minds a comprehensive understanding of their world, knowledge of materials and methods, weather patterns, and animal behavior that allowed them to thrive in conditions we would find fatal. They solved problems with elegance and ingenuity, engineering warmth from cold landscapes through intelligence rather than force. Their solutions remind us that humanity has always been a technological species, that our greatest survival tool has always been the knowledge we carry and share. The flames they lit when conditions allowed were expressions of that intelligence, but so too were the nights they survived without fire. Huddled together in the darkness, wrapped in the accumulated wisdom of generations, waiting for the dawn.